Hi everyone, it's Erin, and today I will be recreating this piece of concept art by Claire Keane for Disney's Frozen. And I have my gouache, I've got some white Liquitex, I've got a roundhead brush number 6, some black drawing paper, water, paper towel, and my wax palette. So I'm starting off by drawing out the composition, and I will admit right away I've never seen Frozen. I'm like the only one left who hasn't seen this movie. So I really don't know much. I do know that the villain in it is not Elsa, who is the woman in this piece with the crown, who's bending over and looking very menacing. But in this concept, at the very beginning of the production, the idea was that Elsa would be this evil snow queen, and this original concept art was made by Claire Keane, who is also an author, an illustrator, a visual development artist who contributed to Disney films such as Enchanted, Entangled, Wreck-It Ralph, and Frozen. Interestingly enough, her grandfather also worked at Disney. He was Glenn Keane, and she's the granddaughter of cartoonist Bill Keane, who made the comic strip The Family Circus. So that is who originally made this piece. And in this piece, we see the star of the movie, whose name I don't know. I apologize. But with her is Elsa, who I do know is her sister. I hope I'm not spoiling anything for anyone. I mean, again, I'm probably the only one who hasn't seen this movie. And I even know that unlike so many other Disney movies, the prince does not save the princess. And in fact, her sister saves her. Excuse me, which is a refreshing plot. I love that. What I'm showing you right now is me drawing out the composition, but really focusing on the negative space, because the negative space is creating some very specific shapes in this case. So this would be a great piece to practice drawing with, because those negative spaces, if you just focus on trying to recreate those shapes in between elements, it actually makes it way easier. So like the shapes in between her leg and her arm, or in between the two characters, because they're so close, there are these really specific shapes. And now we're mixing up some water with the Liquitex, the white Liquitex, and it's basically matte acrylic. It's very similar to the Holbein gouache that I use, which is also matte acrylic technically. It is called acrylic gouache because it behaves so much like traditional gouache in that it is flat, it's matte, it dries quickly, and it has a very similar consistency. The big difference, or the two big differences, are that traditional gouache has gum arabic in it, which is the binder, which binds the pigment with the chalk, whereas acrylic gouache, or matte acrylic, if you want to call it that, it doesn't have the same binder. It's not as creamy. In some ways, it's not as sensual to work with. I'm at a loss for how to describe it, but it doesn't have the same creaminess. But the other big difference is that acrylic gouache, or matte acrylic, doesn't reactivate once it's dry. So once it's dry, that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. But traditional gouache can be reactivated, which makes blending a little easier. And you can also put a bunch of paint on a palette and come back to it the next day and then reactivate it, like similar to watercolor. So those are the big differences. Liquitex, I bought it because it seemed a bit more affordable to buy that. I go through so much white. I use white a lot, especially because I do a lot of Ivan Durrell and Mary Blair concept art, and they used high value colors. And when you're creating a high value color, you're adding in white. And this piece, almost every single color that I mix up, or every hue I mix up, has white in it. So I thought it would be a better idea to get a bigger bottle of the white Liquitex. And it turns out I was right. And in fact, I actually like the way it paints better than the gouache that I've been using, the acrylic gouache. So there you go. I'm mixing up the skin tone for the main character, who, again, I don't know her name. I haven't looked anything up. Like, I know nothing about this movie. The only thing I know, besides the fact that, like, her sister saves her instead of a prince, is that there is a snowman in it named Olaf. And I only know that because my friend's dog was named Olaf. So, yeah. Anyway, I will see it eventually, maybe. I have to admit, I'm not like the hugest fan of Disney movies, even though I do. I do all this concept art. I'm definitely more of a fan of the artists. And if I had to choose, I'd probably go with like a Studio Ghibli film or a lot of stuff from Cartoon Network. But anyway, back to the piece. I just made a few different sort of variations of the skin tone. So this is the base tone, which is very light. It's a very pale, fair, light peachy pink. And then I've got this more I was going to call it pungent, this more pungent pink, this brighter sort of pink color for her nose and her ears and her cheeks, because the movie's Frozen. So she's cold. So she's got like a rosy cheek, nose, ear thing going on, which is very, very cute. And I just blended them by doing the base color first. And then while it was still a little bit wet, putting that pink over top very lightly with a little pressure, and you get a nice blend. Now we're mixing up the color for her jacket. So what you can't see on screen is that there's a little bit of black. I added some black to the white. So I've created a tone, which is a high value gray. And then I'm adding cyan and ultramarine. Now ultramarine is the warm blue, cyan is the cool blue, and her little jacket is more of the cool blue. So it's, it's leaning more towards the cyan. And getting the very tippy tip of my brush and getting in there and painting her pointy boobs. And I noticed while I was doing this that everything in this piece, or not everything, but so many elements of this piece are pointy. And then I thought, oh, that's cool. That sort of makes me think of icicles, like the pointy icicle, or snowflakes. This sort of shape is, I think, adding to the overall concept that this is, that it's frozen, that all of this takes place in a cold place. Does she make things cold? What the heck? What's the story? I don't know. I'm making her skirt color now, which now leans towards the warm blue. So it has the same mixture as the jacket, but instead of it having more cyan, it has more ultramarine. And these two hues together are working really beautifully to, again, add to that sense that this is a cold mood, right? Or tone, that there's this cold sort of overall theme. And they work so well together because they're the same value, and they're both desaturated. They're both tonal. They both have gray in them. So they both have the same amount of white, the same amount of black, but just different temperatures of blue. And it creates a lovely cohesive feeling and a very strong sense of the atmosphere of the piece or of the movie. The leg closest to us is the same color as the skirt, but then later when I paint the leg further away, it just has more black added to it so that it looks shadow. It's like looks like it's in the shadow. And now we're making the color for Elsa's face. And in this piece, Elsa is evil. As I mentioned, like the original concept was that she was going to be this evil snow queen. I did mention that, didn't I? And that's why I chose the piece for my villain series, because she isn't actually a villain in the movie. I know. I just thought it was cool that at one point that was the idea. And look at that very pointy icicle nose. But her skin color is the color of a Smurf. And when I was mixing it up, I was like, oh, this is totally Smurf blue. And I did mention in a video before that I used to live in an apartment that was painted that color, and I felt like I lived inside of a cake. Using this the same color as her jacket for these little details around the bottom of the skirt. And yeah, this was fun, very quick. These shapes so similar to mid-century illustration. It's really borrowing from that style. The artist Claire, I went and checked out her website. I think she does a great job of like paying homage to this type of style, but then putting in her own vibe, her own sort of flavor to it. But yeah, the shapes, are a little bit more angular, a little bit more cut out, you could say. But then these sweet details, this sort of, like simple, not super precise, but yeah, just adding something so nice to that skirt there. We're going to make a little bit of a shadow color so that I can add the details to the jacket, and then I'll use that as the same, I'll use the same hue as the shadow for the skirt. I want this outfit. I have a feeling it wouldn't be super comfortable. There's a corset involved, although I do like wearing a corset. Any of you into corsets? Okay, we're getting personal. So these shadows, which I noticed were not dark enough, so then I go over them with a slightly darker shade of the same color. And of course, shade means I add a little bit more black. And I also have done several coats. So I should have mentioned that earlier, that the white of Elsa's dress, the skirt, the jacket, they're all done in multiple coats. You wait for the first coat to dry, and then you can go ahead with the second and third. And the dress, the white dress on Elsa, that took 4 coats to get it to be that really lovely, bright, opaque white. But yeah, it turned out nicely. And then these blue lips, this face reminds me of the blue meanies from Yellow Submarine, which really freaked me out as a kid. They're just super creepy and weird. And so is she in this piece anyway. And I used that blue for her little snowflake earring, going in with the eyeball here. I usually have a hard time with faces. I tend to rush them because I'm like kind of nervous. They're so important. So I tend to rush things that are important. I need to learn patience. But in this case, I think it turned out okay. I love the way the lips turned out on her. I can't say the same for the other girl, although the eye here turns out really well. We get a nice thing happening when I add the eyelashes, which is a bit later. Right now I'm going to do the gloves, I believe, is what I'm doing next, and the little fuzzy creature. I think the fuzzy creature around Elsa's neck, yeah, this thing is, what is it? It's like a ferret or like a snow fox, a snow ferret, a snow something. Does anyone know? Tell me what it is. But it was great. I love painting this because you get these nice little brush strokes that look like fur. And I just do that by less pressure, tip of my brush, going quickly. And then, yeah, it's like these lovely little gestural strokes. Although I do forget to paint his ears. I apologize. The ears and his nose, they're pink, and I forgot to paint those at the end, but that's okay. He doesn't need to smell her here. He's wrapped around her neck. He doesn't need those anymore. All right. Her hand here. I love the gesture of how she's sort of lifting the other girl's chin up, and just the whole thing feels very menacing. But I love the composition, with that repeated shape of the triangles, the sort of icicle shape, but also the interaction between the two of them. Elsa's bending over. She looks super tall and freaky. And yeah, I think it's a great piece. I instantly, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I have to paint this, even though I have never seen the movie. So the gloves and the creature were made, you saw it when I was mixing it, but it is more black and white, so more of a gray with just a little bit of cyan and some ultramarine in there, and then using that to create this sort of frosty effect, this magical frost that's coming off of her gloves and off the tail of the creature around the edge here. And these were fun. I did these by I almost felt like my hand was like a little sewing machine, just like you get this jittery thing going, and it just goes up and down, and you get these little tiny speckles. Some creases in her dress there, and then we're just doing this little feather hairpiece, or furry headpiece. And now we're gonna mix up her muff or her gloves, or what a muff is. Oh no, I'm just looking at the positioning of it, and I'm like, oh, she's keeping her hands warm in her muff. Look, I just showed how the tip of the brush is very, very pointy, and you can test out how pointy the tip of a brush is by holding it in front of the palm of your hand or in front of a white piece of paper or something, so you can really get a sense if the tip is pointy enough for your details. And in this case, it definitely was. This Artist Loft brush is great. I've been really loving it. Yeah, it holds a lot of paint, but then I can get these little teeny tiny details. I love this. The shapes in this also sort of remind me of It's a Small World, which Mary Blair designed. You know, she was the art director for It's a Small World, and just the shapes, the sense of temperature, the details, and of course that mid-century sort of cutout shape style. Yeah, I'm guessing Claire is a big fan of Mary Blair's. Yeah, that eye. It's very menacing. But this part's cute. Like, look, this is kind of a fluke, but I get this really great little eyelash sort of shape at the top of her eye there. And now we're doing her hair, which is a true red mixed with yellow and a little bit of black to make it kind of a brick red color. I add a small amount of white, and then we can paint in her hair. So now that I've brought in red along with the pink of her face, we now have a complementary color scheme because we've got the greeny blue, which is the complement to pink, and then we've got the warm blue, which is the complement to the orange of the hair. Well, yellow is, oh no, yellow's complementary is purple. So yeah, we have a complementary color scheme happening here. But it doesn't make the eyes vibrate. You know, very often when you have like an orangey red and a cyan together, it's going to make your eyes vibrate, sort of like have that weird effect. But in this case, it doesn't happen because it's such a high value desaturated cyan blue, and then the red is more of a brick red. I don't love the lips. I feel like the lips are a little clunky, but that's okay. It turned out in the freckles too, but it's pretty cute. And then some dark details on the hair, a little bit of extra fluff around the headpiece here. And there we go. Oh, last bit is the magical snow dust on her gloves. Some sparkle. Yay! Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to join me for a paint night, information's in the description below. Thanks, everyone.